we have a few people to say a few things before we start, people who have been very involved with green spaces generally and green spaces in here in particular. For example, we have with us Paddy Tipping, who was once our MP and was here for the very first time, the very first opening, and spoke then, I think, about the Crow Act and the, which people know as the right to roam, which benefits us all over the country. So anyway, he's here again now to sort of say how things would be evolved since then. Then also we have Rosemary Healy, who I can't see, here we are, Councillor Healy, who has taken on the mantle of Dave Trimble, who looked after our parks for us for a good many years and got us lots and lots of green flags, more than any other city apparently. So she's taking on a very good role there, looking after our parks in the future. And then to finish with, almost, will be Tom Huggan, who is a champion for green spaces in the city. And then finally, of course, we have Kate, who has come all the way up from London, or near London, as the Secretary of the Open Spaces Society, and came up 5 years ago to put our second enclosure oak in, and therefore wants to see how well it's growing. I should imagine now. So there we are, that's the plan before we actually move off.
It's been a really tough 18 months, really hard for all of us, and we're beginning to come out of it. And what was interesting during the lockdown was that people did come out of it, and people were out walking and exploring our open spaces. And as June said, June and Kate and one or two others here were involved in the big Crow Act, Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, that gave us the right to roam over open country. And that's great, but we need access in the locality now. We need to have access, Rosemary, to our parks, a good standard of parks here in Nottingham. And we need to have local walking routes so that people, having been through the lockdown and have found their way out into the open spaces, can continue to do that. And I'm delighted that there are more people out walking, more young people out walking. There are some young people here today. Some of us have aged a bit over the years, but let's go forward and make sure that what we really want is a countryside that's open and belongs to us all. And there's a lot to do around that. So thanks for supporting us.
The success of Nottingham's parks can be measured by the number of green flags, as June said. The Green Flag Awards, the benchmark international standard for publicly accessible parks and green spaces in the United Kingdom and around the world. A decade ago, there was less than a handful of Green Flag Awards in the city, and through Councillor Trimble's leadership, Nottingham can now boast of 69 Green Flag Awards, the highest in the whole of the United Kingdom. Thank you very much for inviting me.
June's asked me to say how we can all help to protect and enhance our open green spaces. So I've now compiled Tom's top 10 tips, which I hope to do in the next 3 minutes. The first is enjoy each and every one of our green spaces, including the smaller ones, the spaces in between, using the old adage, use it or lose it. Second, invite others to join you, the couch potatoes who don't come out, and let's have some more lurid media headlines. One or two we had. Police urge council to close parks because there are too many people in it. That's what we want, too many people in it. Third, invite your local councillors to join you, like Rosemary and others who are here today, because they make so many things happen and you need them to be on our side. Fourth, here's a new one. Ask your local GP to include green social prescribing in the practice treatment, and this means taking everybody out for a walk to make sure that they're healthier, i.e. take a walk with your pill. 5. Get your local MP to campaign for government funding for maintenance and improvement. Without the dosh, we can't do it, and all our MPs in the city are very good at that. 6. Help the maintenance staff, those who are there on the ground doing things. They know what has to be done. They also know what's going to be done, if I may say so, long before the councils and the other decision makers do, and they know all the gossip, so talk to them as often as you can. 7. Help the local volunteer groups with the practical work, simple things like clearing up litter, more important things like plantings and so on, and most of the areas we're going to do have these local groups. 8. Join one of the local campaigning groups. Nottingham Open Spaces Forum, Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, Nottingham Civic Society, etc, etc. Friends of the Forest.
Friends of Nottingham Arboretum as well.
Exactly, all these bodies. Number 9, keep constant vigilance and watch. You are the eyes and ears. If you see anything that's going on, tell us all about it, everyone that I've spoken about. Number 10, and this has already been referred to by Rosemary. Plant trees. All of you plant a tree. Get all your friends and neighbours to plant trees. The city have got all sorts of places to plant trees. So plant as many trees as we can, because we need them everywhere we can. And lastly then, having given you the 10, this is pick and mix like the sweet shops. Pick whichever ones of these you can be doing, as many of you can.
And now finally, we have of course Kate Ashbrook, who's come up especially to cut the ribbon and start things off. Ribbon? Oh, that'll come later, yes. I will mention at this point the ribbon was made on one of the 19th century machines of Richard Arkwright in the Masson factory. And the scissors are from one of the Nottingham cloth development factories. So it's historical scissors cutting a historical ribbon.
Gosh.
So that will be over there shortly. So
Okay, well, I've done Tom's number 10. I've planted a tree in Nottingham 6 years ago. The little enclosure oak, which is next to the bigger enclosure oak. And the bigger enclosure oak was planted at the same time as my organisation was founded, 1865. But 20 years before that, we had the Parliamentary Inclosure Act. And I want to pay tribute to the Aldermen and Burgesses of Nottingham with their far-sighted campaign to ensure that under that Enclosure Act, they won the maximum amount of land possible for open space, for recreation, for green space, for enjoyment. I mean, communities all over the country had the opportunity and failed. The Enclosure Act seized their lands and gave them nothing in return. But here in Nottingham, you took full advantage. And that is wonderful, because today we benefit from that with the wonderful green spaces that we're going to walk around today. And I want to pay tribute to June, who has kept that light alive with her enclosure walk, with the repeated walks every year, with her leaflet, with her beautiful maps. You know, she has absolutely spearheaded this campaign, and it's a great joy for me to be here with you today. But of course, what the Burgesses and the Aldermen did was wonderful, but as others have said, we can't just leave it there. We have to be ever vigilant. We have a government that is intent on development, on seizing open spaces for development, whether we need it or not, apparently. And we need to fight that. We need to fight them by, we can register land as village greens if we have evidence of 20 years use by local people without being stopped, without asking permission. You register with the county council. If you succeed, that land is safe and local people have the right of recreation there. That is just one way of protecting open space. But my organisation is helping people all over England and Wales to save their spaces, and we get cries from them of, our space is under threat. Once it's under threat, it's too late to register it as a green. So think about the green spaces in your communities, probably outside Nottingham, and think about the ones that you can rescue, because the fight is on. It has never been more desperate, and yet green spaces have never been more important. As Paddy says, what has the pandemic shown us? So we have a huge battle to fight, and we need to work together on that. And community strength is really important. And my organisation is here to support and guide and offer advice to help people achieve that. But we can't do it without people voting with their feet, using their spaces, lobbying their councillors. Lovely to have Rosemary here telling us about what's going on in Nottingham. And that's what we need to do. And local councils are crucial in this, even though the government has removed them now from the name of its department. We no longer have a Department of Local Government. It's all levelling up. No local government. But local government is hugely important in this, and we all need to work together. So I just want to say a really big thank you to everybody who's made today possible, who's protected the Inclosure Walk, who's caused this town trail to come into being, because it is truly a wonderful asset for Nottingham, and I shall be going to other places and singing its praises and saying, why not you? We all need town trails like this. So I'm declaring the town trail, the 18th century Inclosure Walk, open! Bravo! Hooray!
Prisoners in.
This is a park here. Originally, it was one of the few high bits in the meadows. The meadows used to be flooded every year, and there were just one or two bits that were above most of the flood levels, and this is one of them. It was also famed because it had the best display of the spring crocuses that used to be growing all over the meadows. They were famous and remarked upon in the local paper and so on as they came out. And it was the tradition for children to come down here and get great bunches of these fine crocuses. As they built up the rest of the meadows, they had to build the ground up. So all the houses were above the flood level, or most of them. That was the idea. So this became the cricket ground for this area, and was known as the cricket ground. And now it's the recreation ground.
Utilised it as yeah, so it comes up every month.
I discovered by chance.
Mostly when I'm singing in them, but
Was in the lovely churchyard of St Mary's, and just to say a little bit about this area, we're in the middle of what was the Saxon borough of Nottingham, and so this church dates back to a very early date, but of course it's been built and rebuilt many times over the years. In Georgian times it developed large fissures and cracks and had to be restored, and then it was so badly damaged it had to be completely closed in 1842, and it took many years to rebuild various parts of it. Rebuilding was done by various architects, including Scott and Moffat and Bodley and Garner. You may know the name Bodley and Garner from Clumber Chapel if you've been to Clumber, but they were very distinguished architects, so only the best for Nottingham. And other architects and people like Kemp did some of the stained glass inside, and there are tombs to people like John Salmon and Thomas Thurland. And if you know Nottingham, you know there was a Thurland Street in Nottingham, and obviously Thomas gave his name to that street. There's lots of history here. When the French came to England, they settled, of course, in Nottingham, and they decided that the whole of Nottingham should expand, and so there was a French borough and a Nottingham Saxon borough, and the two were side by side. Nottingham was very unusual in that it had an English borough and a French borough for many years. Now, looking at the church, as I say, a lot of the refurbishment and rebuilding was in Victorian times, but there are institutions associated with St Mary's that are worth mentioning. For example, Dame Agnes Mellor founded a free school in the very church here in 1513, and there's still a commemoration service every year to the school. Also, the Blue Coat School, which you may have heard of, that was founded here in the church porch in 1706. So a lot of things get founded and developed from St Mary's. It was a very large parish, but all around here in Georgian times there were beautiful gardens, and Nottingham was known as a garden town. But gradually, with industrialisation and the increase in population, those empty plots and the beautiful garden plots got filled up with buildings. And of course the buildings, many of them are beautiful, they're associated with hosiery and lace, and so the area became known as the Lace Market. And if you do get time to perambulate the streets around here, lots of what you see will be the old hosiery and lace buildings, and we'll be passing some of them. We're going to go through that narrow little walkway and do a left turn through part of the Lace Market, and we'll see some of those buildings. By the way, we've passed the Shire Hall, beautiful 18th century building by James Gandon, who also built the beautiful Dublin Customs House. It was a favourite spot on the side.
And what's Chris's other name? Because I'm going to write my blog.
This is the ex-county architect.
Is he? Yeah. What does I know? He works there.
Did you get it sorted?
Right, folks, this place now is called Victoria Park, but it didn't start with that name. The whole area here, quite a number of the closes round here, are known as Meadows Platts closes, and it took the Inclosure Committee a little while to decide which bit they'd have for the cricket ground here, and they chose in the end to put it next to the cholera burial ground, which is just through there. And as it was a cricket ground, they called it then the Meadow Platts Cricket Ground, sort of as you might imagine. So this then became the Meadow Platts Cricket Ground. There was a little road at the far end which went to the cholera cemetery, and there was another road over that way which went through to Carlton and so on. And what was done at the same time, they put the road through to make them join. So there we are, we've got the road running from one end to the other, past the cholera ground, past the Meadow Platts Cricket Ground. Cricket in a space like this is not perhaps a particularly good idea. You can see as the traffic got more and more busy, you'd have a few more accidents of people passing by. In the late 19th century it was changed from being a cricket ground to being just a recreation ground, and things were put in for children to play on. So there were the Victorian equivalents of what you can see behind you, and a drinking fountain, and lots of nice trees and so on. So that's really the history of this place. The cholera ground, eventually the tombstones were all removed around by the walls, and a hole has been put through the wall is not really part of this. This is enclosure land. That obviously is burial ground. But they make all one big space now. So we should go through that way, see it. Sign here, you see, will tell you how to go through there, turn right, and then you go along the old road that went through the St Anne's Well. A very, very famous healing well, supposedly, like they all are. The people used to come miles and miles to spend time being deep in the water there. So people used to go out there anyway on a sort of Sunday afternoon to enjoy themselves out there. There was also what they called the Shepherd's Race, one of these turf-cut mazes that people sort of ran around to show their vigour, their strength. So the St Anne's Well Road now is not particularly interesting, but it's nonetheless a way of getting to the beginning of all the rest. So that's what we're going to do. So we go through here, following the directions, turn right at the end, on out.
We thought it would be nice to gather around this monument, a lion. And this is here because of a William Abednego Thompson. And he was an apprentice butcher in Nottingham. He was born in New Yard, just off Parliament Street in the Victorian era. But he used to like a punch-up. And he used to roam around the streets and people would pick fights, but he found that he was a better boxer or pugilist than any of the other lads. He formed a gang and they were called the Nottingham Lambs, but there was nothing very lambish about them. But as his, if you like, legendary skills came to the fore, he was asked more and more to box in professional bouts, and people would put bets on him. And if they won, that was all to the good. And so he became a very famous boxer, and he boxed all over the place, and he boxed until he was into his late 30s. And throughout his life he claimed he'd never had a single black eye, and for a boxer that's unusual. And this is bare knuckle fighting. He also boasted he could throw a cricket ball further than anybody else. He was very good at boasting basically, but he was an excellent boxer. When he gave up boxing finally, he became a preacher. He lived in Beeston, his family was there, and he never had a day's trouble when he was preaching, because he'd roll up his shirt sleeves and sort them out there and then. So he was very well known even in later life. And when he died, Nottingham thought, well, this is one of our famous people and we must remember him. So a monument was created here because he was said to be lion-hearted, and there's a little inscription here about him being lion-hearted, and I'm sure he must have been. He's a very skilled boxer.
I think they might give us another 2 years. I know. Don't worry, we'll fight for more.
The one I can get.
Yeah.
God, I only charge it up every few minutes.
Do you really?
Stuff fantastic.
Yeah.
And actually use it as my partner's grandmother's.
Right, okay.
And we do use it actually, but
Vintage item.
it's super.
Segregation.
on not the old Nottingham Canal.
But Nottingham escaped the cholera because they had clean water. They didn't really quite know that was why. They thought it was bad air that brought cholera. But the fact that they were drinking clean water, they thought the fact they were keeping things cleaner. With water you could keep things clean, so they thought maybe that was partly it. But for whatever reason it was, we escaped the cholera that particular year. It's still used, the reservoir here. This is the highest point within the town, but there are further high points even higher up Napoli, and so the reservoirs there which feed this one, which then feeds the town.
He was feeling a bit.
I don't know where this is.
And I think it's just amazing. You know, we're all so switched on to our stuff. Just another
Just moved in. Yeah.
I'll see you. What is it? Sorry to them. Well, that's not it.
Basically, this arboretum was created as part of the Inclosure Walk project. It was opened in 1852. It's got a lot of history, and I could go on and on and on. I don't really want to do that, but just the highlights, I suppose, are the bell tower there with the 4 cannon, with references and memories of the Crimean War and the Opium Wars. There's an aviary which I'm at great pains to point out has rescue birds in it for the first time this year. A sign has actually gone up to tell everybody that, so you don't need to worry about the welfare of those birds because they are rescue or giveaways or whatever. But the main thing is the trees. Now there's so many of them that I don't think I can really go through them all. Graham, is there anything in particular that we should mention, do you think? Anything you'd like to highlight? Perhaps a plane? Too many. Well, I think Graham's favourite is a plane tree, a London plane, which is right over that side, sort of almost as far as Waverley Street. There's a statue, which is behind us here, of a politician who was a Chartist. His name is Fergus O'Connor, and he was the only Chartist MP ever elected anywhere in the country. He stood for Nottingham East, I think, or whatever it was then called. And he was an MP for 2 years. He was from County Cork, I think, and was originally a horse trainer and horse dealer. There's also Samuel Morley at the bottom. There's a statue to him.
To a female suffragette in London or something.
There is, it's over there. What you want to do is follow this path here.
The green festival on this wall. Yeah. That's 6. And then
the light.
We're going to go this way.
yes, I think it goes through.
Autumn crocus, associated with Nottingham. Not exclusive to here, but associated with it. We're entering the last leg of our journey. So some people have done a half marathon today, but I think you've got to congratulate yourselves that you've done the whole Inclosure walk today and inaugurated the town track.
For those of you interested in cricket, there's a grave of George Summers just over there. It's the family grave. George Summers was essentially killed playing cricket. He was playing for Notts against the MCC in 1870, I think it was. W.G. Grace was playing for the MCC at the time. He was a doctor. There was a fast bowler from Derbyshire called Platts who bowled a ball that hit a stone in the wicket at Lord's. The Lord's wicket in those days was absolutely awful. It was known as being one of the worst cricket wickets. George Summers got hit on the temple and collapsed, was taken to a hotel where the Nottinghamshire team was staying, came back and sat in the sunshine and watched the cricket match the next day. He then caught a bumpy train back to Nottingham, went to his father's pub on Station Street and died that night. W.G. Grace, who was a doctor, professed that had he rested more, he might have survived. So the family grave is just over there. There used to be a plaque on it that was donated by the MCC in memory of Summers, but unfortunately that plaque isn't there anymore. Anybody who knows where it is, I'm sure would be very interested to find out. But yeah, so that's just one of many interesting graves here. I'm sure.
Where is it exactly?
It's one that's actually somebody's just cleaned it off recently, just round there. It's about three or four in. Yeah, okay. just there. It's the Summers. It's the family grave. Anyway.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you.
So how long after that did they introduce helmets into...
Well, funny you should mention it, because the next batsman in was actually Richard Daft, and he came to the wicket wearing a towel wrapped round his head, partly as a protest. He did go on to score 116 in the match, but the match was overshadowed by Summers' demise. So it was one of Grace's many centuries, but it's almost that was forgotten as well, because the match was all about Summers. So, it took a few years before Lord's it had taken a lot of complaining to get to that stage. After that, Lord's improved their wicket pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. I know it's reason it, I guess, and it shows that I said there was for a while. It's disappeared. I think we were told. Oh right, okay. Because one of my sisters lives in.
It's Pond. It's Pond. I remember I said that a few years ago.
So this was an association between June, Friends of the Forest, and the council. So these are here, so people can then self-guide with the enclosure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we would normally see Inclosure.
This is what we've had Yes, I will. All right then. We'll see you in a bit. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, I'm really pleased to see that the little oak tree is thriving. We're both 6 years older since we last met, but it's doing well. So thank you, Nottingham, for looking after it. And I just feel really proud to have had a part in this, because there's the wonderful, wonderful enclosure oak planted at the same year that my society was formed, 1865. But obviously in Nottingham you were already way out ahead of the Open Spaces Society, saving your spaces. We came on in 1865 because the London Commons were under threat, and so at that point we helped to save Hampstead Heath, Epping Forest, Wimbledon Common, Berkhamsted Common, and many, many others. But you know, we followed in your footsteps. I just wanted to pay tribute to one of our members, Bernard Selwyn. Chris Thompson reminded me when we were a bit further up there that if it wasn't for Bernard, the tram would have gone through part of the forest. He studied the parliamentary bill when it came out, he lobbied, he advised us, he was absolutely brilliant. And he was one of our committee members who just worked tirelessly for the cause of open spaces. So I'd really like to remember him today, because he was a very special friend. And finally, I just want to say a big thank you. I have really enjoyed that walk. I've learnt so much. What a beautiful city, what a fabulous place. So I'll take that away, and what I've learnt today I will pass on to others, because they need to do as you have done in Nottingham. Thank you.